Welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari, and this is Great Big History Podcast. And in this episode, we do part 2 of the Persian Wars. When we left off, Persia had been defeated in its invasion of Athens at the Battle of Marathon. Now, Persia had not tried to conquer all of Greece. They just tried to beat up one little city-state because it had gotten involved in the Ionian Revolt, which was part of the Persian Empire. So in the 10 years between the Battle of Marathon and the second part of the Persian Wars, Xerxes' invasion, Persian kings had lost some legitimacy. They had legitimacy problems. If Athens can defeat them, a little dinky city in Greece, why can't Egypt? Why can't Babylon? Why can't these bigger, richer places? And so what Xerxes needs, Darius, his father, dies of natural causes. And what Xerxes needs is revenge. He needs to beat up Athens to prove to all of these governors, all of these other peoples that are part of the Persian Empire, that they have to listen to the Persians. Because very quickly the threads, even though the Persians were nice, the threads were beginning to pull away. If you're Egypt, you're like, well, if Athens can win, why can't we win? So why should I listen to the Persians? Maybe the Persians aren't that tough. So Xerxes had to prove the Persians are that tough. He had another problem. Why did we lose? How did my dad lose? We were the greatest empire in the whole wide world. How did we lose to a little dinky state? Little dinky city? And the answer is that Persia doesn't do small things. Persia doesn't defeat one city. Persia conquers countries. Egypt, Mesopotamia, Media. And so Xerxes' idea was, my dad thought too small. He sent a dinky little general with a small army to defeat one city. And that's not how we operate. The king goes, the king brings his massive army, and we conquer Greece, a country. And so, in 480 BC, Xerxes leads his army across the Hellespont, across where Istanbul is today, where Byzantium and Constantinople were before they changed into Istanbul. The Dardanelles. He crosses over from Asia into Europe and invades Greece. From 480 to 479, he has a land army and a navy for supplies. See, the land army is 250,000 troops. It's the size of Babylon, but it's on the move, and it constantly needs food. So the idea was, Greece is too poor to feed that many people all at once, and so what we'll do is we'll bring in supplies by sea. Totally makes sense. Totally works. They overwhelm Thrace. They overwhelm Macedonia. They come into Macedonia and they go, we're here. Who wants to fight us? And the Macedonians say, not us. Most Greek cities, in fact, surrender. Only 13 fight them. And some cities, like Thebes, or especially Argos, have their own issues. And they're looking forward to the Persians. Argos hated Sparta. And so Argos is just waiting for a Persian army to arrive. Argos has been sending love letters to the Persian king for like years. Like, come, we'll help you. Only 13 of the 1,000 or so cities resist because Xerxes' army is just too big. He can't fight it. So there are 3 major battles. The first is the Battle of Thermopylae. Now, Thermopylae is a pass between northern Greece and central Greece. It is a place that a phalanx can block up. So there'll be many Thermopylaes. the Greeks will fight a battle of Thermopylae against the Romans, and the Romans will just run over them, will just destroy them. But it's a natural place to defend an invasion coming into central Greece. And Sparta was going to lead this. Sparta leads this battle. They are the leading, land power. And they walk up and they go, we're the Spartans, we're going to run the show. And everyone says, all right. And they're defeated. The Spartans are wiped out. Those who remain are also killed or captured. Now they're famous for the 300 Spartans, but there was an army about 5,000. They go fleeing, back to central Greece. But for 3 days, a Greek defense held. Heavily armed Greeks turned out to be better soldiers. And this becomes the theme of the next couple of centuries. That the Greek phalanx proves that under certain circumstances, it can fight better than a Mesopotamian army. The second result is that Athens is burned. Once the Persian army gets through Thermopylae, it spreads out, it marches down on Athens, it burns Athens. Pretty much all of Greece is open to invasion. And that leads us to Salamis. Salamis is an Athenian naval victory. It's the Athenian navy that will do most of the fighting and win. It is an Athenian admiral who is, though not in charge, comes up with the plan. And he will lure the Persian navy into a trap. This is the cleverness is better than strength we got from Homer. See, the Spartans, having lost at Thermopylae, now want to fight, have a giant, what the Germans would call a Götterdämmerung, a giant battle for the end of the world. If we're going to go down, we're going to go down fighting. And so they want to fight on the isthmus, the connection between central Greece and southern Greece and the Peloponnese. And they want to put themselves up. They want to get there. They want to basically fight a second Thermopylae. The problem with that is the Persians have a navy. They'll just land a large army behind them and attack them from both sides. Like, at this point, at Thermopylae, you can do it. It's up in the mountains. You could fight a battle to the last man. At the isthmus, you could just be surrounded. So basically the Spartans wanted to fight a battle to the end, just to fight a battle to the end. And other people were like, well, the Persians aren't so mean. They're not so bad to people. You just have to pay some taxes. The Athenians, on the other hand, had their city burned, and they're like, we want our city back. Otherwise, we're leaving to Sicily. We're just going to start over. And so the Athenians are able to convince everyone to fight a giant naval battle. The Athenians then convince Xerxes to fight the battle where they want it. They send a spy to Xerxes to say, everybody's running away. They're all cowards. The Spartans are crazy. It's a lie wrapped in the truth. And so they tell the truth part, and then they go, here's the lie part. If you invade Salamis, the Straits of Salamis, you will catch the navies unaware, and you can destroy them. And it turns out that was the lie. That was the trap. Xerxes goes up to a mountain with his writers, with his historians, to write down who does good and who does bad, so they could be rewarded and or punished. There is one Phoenician princess, one Phoenician queen, who's like, don't listen to these Greeks. Don't listen to this. This guy's a spy. You know he's a spy. He just walked up and said, hey, I know how to get Athens to surrender. Like, that doesn't happen. These are Greeks. Beware Greeks bearing gifts. And Xerxes is like, I don't know that story. It's like, it's the Iliad, his most famous story of all. listen to me. And they're like, you're a woman. You don't know anything. Woman. And she's like, fine. Do what you want. And so when a naval battle happens, here's a funny story. Here's the interesting story. When a naval battle happens, the Persian ships roll into the straits. The problem is it's like Marathon. The Athenians have lured them into another. They have more ships, but there's now no room because they're between the mainland and the Salamis Islands. There's no room for the Persian ships who are bigger, faster, but also more numerous to get around. And so basically what the Greeks were able to do is just go straight and ram straight into them and then back up and ram them again. And so it's a complete disaster for the Persians. It's a total victory for the Athenians. And this is a great moment. And in it, Xerxes is on the mountain watching this, and he's watching the ships, and he's watching this disaster start to happen in front of him. And he's like, oh my God, what is going on? Okay, those ships over there, they're doing really well. They're hitting other ships. They're hitting the Greek ships. They're winning. Who is that? And they're like, yeah, that's the Phoenician princess. And Xerxes says, woe is the king whose men fight like women, and whose women fight like men. Later, after the battle, a bunch of the men, the princess, the queen, the Phoenician queen, will just basically become a pirate. She'll get her ships and be like, enough of this. I'm not listening to you people, and go off and become like pirate princess of the Mediterranean. Meanwhile, the other admirals, all these men will come up, go up the mountain, they'll trek up the mountain and go, Xerxes, 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 this is why he didn't help me, and this is why I did bad. He didn't help me. And it's like all these men blame each other, and Xerxes is like, you know what? I'm just executing you all. You all suck. So, this is a glorious victory for Athens. They have beat Persia twice. Xerxes has to retreat because he lost his ships that were carrying his food. The army has to leave. It's too big to survive in Greece itself. He leaves a leftover army, and that army will be defeated by a allied Greek army at Plataea. Now, the Battle of Salamis is rewritten by Aeschylus in the Persians. Now, the Persians is the only historical play that we have in existence. Most plays, as we talked about dramas, are classical. They pick up classical characters and themes. This was a historical one. And in it, one of the most famous lines is, the walls of Athens are impregnable. Their finest bulwarks are her heroic sons. Now, Athens had walls around the city, but Aeschylus those walls didn't matter. They didn't save the city. The Persians destroyed those walls, burned the city down. But what they couldn't defeat were men rowing in the fleet, the wooden wall of the navy. And so what are the results of this? The results are the Spartans see Thermopylae as a sacrifice, a glorious sacrifice. They got a movie out of it 2,000 years later, 2,500 years later, and they start to turn inward. They were the leaders of Greece, and after Thermopylae, they kind of just like, you know what? We're going to stay in the Peloponnese, we're going to do our thing, and other Greeks don't like them very much. They respect them, but they're too cold, they're too inward looking, they're too weird and militarized. So they turn inward over the next 30, 40 years. Athens, on the other hand, steps in. Athens becomes the leader of the Greek world. Athens has the navy. Athens has its men. Athens has its pride. It's won. Athens becomes the leader of the Greek world. And people come to them and say, Athens, 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 will you protect us if Persia comes back? And Athens says, yeah. In fact, Athens will lead a series of wars. Sparta participates, and for a while technically is in charge, but basically turns his back on it. In Ionia, to free the Ionian cities who had revolted in the 500s. So Athens becomes like the savior of Ionia. Not only the defeater of the Persians, but it actually kicks the Persians out of the Greek cities in Asia Minor. And people come and they say, we will pay you if you protect us. And Athens says, great. And it's insurance. And everybody's cool with it. Because everyone knows that the Persians come back, Athens will come and protect them. Athens is also fun. You could go to Athens. You can't go to Sparta. The Spartans don't want you showing up. There's no tourism to Sparta. Athens, on the other hand, is fun. It will buy your goods. It will make goods you can buy. Everyone is happy. It has education. It becomes, as Pericles will say, the model, the school of Greece. You could go there. It was open. It was an open city, cosmopolitan, not quite cosmopolitan city, but it becomes the largest city in the Greek world. In just one generation, it just leapfrogs into awesomeness. And it's fun. It's a good place to be. So people like the Athenians. Are they brash? Sure. Are they stuck up? Not so much stuck up as self-centered. Like they think they're great. They're conceited. That's it. Why? Because they have a democracy and they vote on the democracy and nobody else has this. And they all look and they're like, shouldn't you do what a nobleman says? And the Athenians are like, nobleman says, who are you? We have a democracy. I vote for what I want to do. I'm awesome. I get out of the road for no man. I bow before no man. I'm a Democrat. I'm part of a democracy. And so the Athenians have this attitude. And things are good. And for 20 years, things are great. But here's the thing. And this is how insurance works. What if you don't need it? What if Persia doesn't come back? Well, eventually, people are going to say, nothing bad has happened, and I could use that money. So, thank you, Athens. Thank you. But I think we're not going to pay any more for insurance. It was very nice that you protected us for 20 years, but now we're just going to end our subscription. Here's the thing. How does insurance feel about that? How does the insurance company feel about that? How does Athens feel about that? They've gotten used to all that money coming in. They're going to buy a lot of stuff with that money. We're going to talk about that in a second. But here's the thing. They start using that money. They credit it to people and they say, oh, when Persia comes, we'll do that. But since we have the cash, how about we spend it on X, Y, and Z? And we'll worry about paying for the war of protecting these places when Persia comes back. And so now they like having that money. They're used to that money. Athens becomes the richest place in Greece. It hadn't been. And now it is. And so what they get is trade and wealth. Great buildings. They get the Navy. They get to pay sailors in the Navy well. And that gets you democracy. Because there's so much money and people are doing well and there's income. There's rich and there's poor, sure. But there's also this middle of income inequality where there's all this money moving around. And with it, they buy culture. They buy leisure. They take days off. They buy culture. Plays. In the future will be philosophy. Education, knowledge, writing, Homer. And Athens becomes the school of Greece. The large fleet allows for the spread of democracy, but Persia doesn't return. And other cities start saying, I don't need the insurance. And it turns out the Delian League is kind of like the Hotel California. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. And what you get is the Athenian Empire, because when people start going to Athens saying, yeah, I don't want to pay anymore, they say, yeah, you know what? That's nice. You thought you were paying protection from Persia? Turns out you're paying for protection from us. Good for you. And it turns out you're paying for us not to destroy you. And a couple of cities say, well, we're not going to pay anyway. And Athens destroys them. They take their ships, they invade their island, they tear down those walls, they kill those people and obliterate them. So the Delian League was like, the Delium League, D-E-L-I-U-M, was like insurance. You may not like paying it, but it's good. It works for you. The Athenian Empire is the mafia. Athens is stronger than you. So for those in the empire, there's no autonomia. Remember, we talked about autonomy in the beginning? Autonomy? There's not, because ultimately you have to do what Athens says. Those afraid of losing autonomia, those afraid of Athens conquering them, of eventually coming to them. See, if you have a crocodile in a lake who starts eating all the fish, and you're off in the corner, you're a fish off in the corner, what are you worried about? You're worried eventually that crocodile is going to come and eat you. And so they need help. They know they need help. Is there someone tough enough, brave enough, and willing to sacrifice for Greece who could save them? And it turns out there is. And those people just happen to not like the Athenians. And that is Sparta. The Spartans. Now, the Spartans had a good reason not to like the Athenians. First, the Athenians moved in on their territory. The Spartans are the traditional leader of the Greek world. Second, they had a little empire in what's called Laconia. Laconia. Where they defeated a people called the Messenians. M-E-S-S-Enia. They defeated them. And here's the thing. There were so many Messenians. Thucydides says it's 10-1 or 9-1, but that's probably not true. It might be 3-1. I've read some modern historians who say it's probably closer to 3-1, because you just can't own 10-1, which isn't completely true. Some of the West Indies islands had a 1-10 white people to slave population, but that was with modern weapons and cannon and the such, which makes it a little easier. But in the Greek world, where every person carries a weapon and numbers matter, 10-1 is probably too big. But somebody got the idea, hey, we defeated the Messenians, and there's a lot more of them than us. You know what we could do? We could turn them into slaves. Now, this never happens in Greece. You don't keep Greeks as fellow slaves because Greeks are terrible at being slaves. Why? Because they love autonomia. They love freedom. They love citizenship. Slavery is against all of that. So you might take Greek slaves and sell them off to Persia or Egypt or some other place, but you don't keep them because they're just going to be a giant pain. You're just asking for them to revolt. And so those are the helots or helots, Helots, the helots, the helots, who are slaves to the Spartans. Now the idea was, hey, we'll take all these slaves and then we never have to work again. I can sit on my porch, I can drink iced tea, and life will be great. And these guys will do all the work for us. It'll be awesome. The problem is that the helots hate being slaves. They should have foreseen this problem. And the Spartans looked around and said, oh boy, they hate us. Thucydides says the helots would like to eat the Spartans raw. Like, their hatred is so intense, you could roast marshmallows from it. So you get a Spartan fear. Because here's the problem. Here's ultimately the problem with slavery. I mean, there's lots of problems, don't get me wrong. There's a whole thing. But if you're the slave owner, here is the ultimate problem. You have to go to sleep sometime. Slaves hate being slaves. Through all of history, slaves do not like being slaves. And you have to go to sleep sometime. And you go, well, you can lock your door. Well, not in the ancient world. How do you make the keys? How do you make the locks? And more importantly, it doesn't matter. Your cook has to butcher a sheep or a hog which means he needs real sharp knives. The men working in the fields need real sharp tools. And there's more of them than you. And so the Spartans were afraid of the Helots. So what do they do? What is their solution? An army that can't lose. The Spartan army. The Spartan Phalanx. An army so tough that the people won't revolt. The Helots won't revolt because if they revolt, they know they're going to lose. And so they militarize their society. Now, what does that mean? How do they do that in practice? The first is they separate the genders. That at the age of 7, boys go and live in barracks and girls go and live in barracks. And the girls learn how to do girl stuff and the boys learn how to do boy stuff. The entire society is about toughness. So everybody's abused. Weak children are thrown to the wolves, lest they be a drain on the society. Kindness is beaten out of people. It's about toughness. And this is an incredibly conservative society. It's not going to risk anything. Why? Because if it does anything risky, like the Athenians keep doing crazy stuff. If it does anything crazy and loses, those Helots are going to revolt. Sparta had to fight the Persians because when the Persians show up, they're going to free the Helots and the Helots are going to murder all the Spartans. They certainly weren't going to work for the Spartans to help stay slaves. Wasn't going to happen. But notice the Battle of Thermopylae. They don't send the 10,000 soldiers of the army. They send only 300. There are more Athenians there. There are as many Plataeans there. They sent their king. They sent one of their kings. They have 2 kings, but they sent one of their general kings, but not both. They didn't send the whole army because 300, one giant phalanx, one big phalanx, they could lose. 10,000, and it's the end of the entire Spartan society. And that's going to happen when they lose the Thebes in the 370s. So we have an incredibly conservative society. It worked. They're going to keep doing it. As long as it works, we don't change. No risks. We're a violent society. But here's the thing. Here's the interesting thing. People respect the Spartans. They're honest, whereas Greeks are famous as liars. They believe in justice. They will sacrifice. They never, ever run in battle. If you are going to defeat a Spartan phalanx, you have to kill every last one of them. They don't run. They fight for each other. There's a famous story at the Olympic Games where an old man has arrived late and he's looking for a seat. And it's hot and it's the Olympics and everything's crowded. Nobody wants to give up their seat. And he's looking and he's an old man with his little cane. He's in the back and he's trying to find, he goes to the middle and he's trying to find, hey, is that open? No, old man. Is that open? No, geezer, you should have shown up yesterday. What about that? No, go away. And he gets up to the front where basically a teacher, high school, middle school teacher, and his class, his 10 students, are there. And they see this old man, and who is not Spartan, and they stand up, and they all offer him their seats. Here, have my seat. Here, have my seat. Here, have my seat. You know when you're on the bus or you're on the subway and it says, this area is for pregnant women and seniors, and young dudes are sitting there, and then they don't get up when a pregnant woman comes in? Well, that's the scene. Except the Spartans got up, offered their seats, please. And not only did they do that, they didn't have to. They're in the front. They had waited 2 days to get those seats. And Thucydides says this about the Spartans, and it sums up what's good about the Spartans. As much as I talk about what's weird about them, what's good about them. And what's good about them is, as Thucydides says, every Greek knew what the right thing to do was, but only the Spartans did it. And that kind of sums up how other people felt about the Spartans. They're weird. They do crazy stuff, but their women are actually more free. Their women are important to their society because they have to be tough too. So we have this society, and Sparta is afraid of Athens. The first is democracies versus slavery. Democracies believe in equality. Slavery by definition is inequality. How do these two, matter and antimatter, how do they live together? Sooner or later, Athens is going to look at Sparta and go, hey, Helots, would you like some freedom? We're free and we're awesome. Sooner or later, Sparta is afraid Athens is going to come looking for them. Plus, others are afraid of Athens because others, like Thebes, Corinth, and other cities, are seeing Athens become an empire. That giant crocodile just devouring other things. And so what they create is the Peloponnesian League. They go to Sparta and say, protect us from Athens. And Sparta says, sure, I'll do that. I can do that. And so Greece gets divided into two alliances, which is fine. The Greek world is in two alliances, but one is land-based, one is naval-based, one is based in the southern Mediterranean and towards Sicily. The other is in the Aegean. Like, as long as nothing bad happens, they could keep going and not have much of a conflict. So guess what happens? The Peloponnesian War. Something bad happens. And so in our next episode, we're going to do the Peloponnesian War, or at least part of the Peloponnesian War. And we'll continue doing war in the Greek world. Thank you.